We used to think ancient Egyptian scribes built the pyramids using vast armies of millions of brutalized, whipped slaves.
They didn't. Archaeological excavations of the worker villages prove they were highly paid, elite master craftsmen fed on prime cattle and protected by state-sponsored health care.
We used to think the massive blocks of Stonehenge were dragged across England purely using primitive wooden logs and raw muscle tissue.
They weren't. Modern ball-bearing physics experiments reveal the stones were likely rolled along custom engineered wooden tracks using stone marble tracks, proving our Stone Age ancestors understood advanced mechanical friction reduction.
We used to think the ancient Romans invented the complex chemical formula for underwater concrete to build their legendary maritime empires.
They didn't. They reverse-engineered the volcanic ash techniques of the Etruscans, a shadowy, older civilization whose architectural genius the Romans completely absorbed and erased from the record.
We used to think the architectural marvel of the Pantheon's massive, unreinforced concrete dome was built using standard scaffolding and modern geometry.
It wasn't. Roman engineers mixed lighter volcanic pumice stone at the top and denser basalt at the bottom, creating an intentional gradient of density that modern engineers still struggle to replicate without steel rebar.
We used to think humanity only began building monumental stone temple complexes after the invention of agriculture and organized farming.
We didn't. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey proves that nomadic hunter-gatherer societies were carving massive 20-ton T-shaped limestone pillars thousands of years before we ever planted a single seed of wheat, completely inverting the timeline of civilization.
We used to think the legendary Bronze Age collapse was a slow, natural economic decay that gradually dissolved ancient empires.
It wasn't. It was an incredibly violent, near-simultaneous apocalypse triggered by a mysterious, highly organized seafaring coalition known only as the Sea People, who burned every major Eastern Mediterranean city to ash in a single generation before vanishing from history.
We used to think ancient human species like the Neanderthals were dim-witted, club-wielding cavemen incapable of complex, abstract thought.
They weren't. Deep cave discoveries show they were burying their dead with complex floral arrangements, creating cave art under the light of primitive oil lamps, and mixing advanced synthetic birch tar adhesives long before Homo sapiens migrated into Europe.
We used to think the Great Sphinx of Giza was carved cleanly during the Old Kingdom around 2500 BC.
It likely wasn't. The deep, undulating vertical erosion marks on its limestone enclosure walls were caused by thousands of years of heavy, torrential, tropical rainfall, a climate pattern that hasn't existed in Egypt since the end of the last ice age over 10,000 years ago.
We used to think Plato invented the concentric, circular island empire of Atlantis entirely out of thin air as a philosophical allegory.
He might not have. If you look at satellite imagery of West Africa, the Richat structure matches Plato's exact concentric circular dimensions, features mountains to the north, and sits on a bedrock of red, black, and white volcanic stone, the exact geological fingerprint of the myth.
We used to think the Trojan War was nothing more than an epic, romanticized fairy tale cooked up by the Greek poet Homer.
It wasn't. In the 19th century, archaeologists excavating the Hizr-Lik in modern Turkey unearthed the literal charred, battle-scarred lair of Troy 7A, proving the massive siege and destruction of the city was a terrifying historical reality.
We used to think ancient civilizations across the Americas, Egypt, and Mesopotamia built towering step pyramids because they shared a unified mystical global religion.
They didn't. They built pyramids because of basic gravity and structural physics. If you want to build a massive stone structure into the sky without modern steel, a pyramid is the only geometric shape that stops the weight from crushing itself.
We used to think the legendary Library of Alexandria was destroyed in a single catastrophic fire set by Julius Caesar's invading armies.
It wasn't. The world's greatest repository of ancient knowledge suffered a slow, agonizing death over centuries, choked out by religious zealots, political budget cuts, and anti-intellectual purges until the books were used to heat public bathhouses.
We used to think ancient Greeks only possessed basic tools, pottery, and primitive weaponry.
They didn't. The recovery of the Antikythera mechanism from a Mediterranean shipwreck revealed a 20,000-year-old analog computer utilizing a network of 30 interlocking bronze gears to track planets and eclipses, a level of mechanical engineering that vanished and wasn't seen again until the 14th century.
We used to think the Baghdad battery was a definitive, functional ancient electrical device used to light up palaces or temples.
It likely wasn't. While the clay jar and copper cylinder can generate a weak galvanic current when filled with wine or vinegar, modern archaeologists believe it was actually a sacred container used to electroplate silver onto gold jewelry using secret chemical techniques.
We used to think ancient weapons were primitive pieces of forged iron and sharpened flint.
They were far more dangerous. Byzantium defended Constantinople using Greek fire, a terrifying liquid flamethrower weapon that burned on top of water and could not be extinguished, utilizing a chemical formula so heavily guarded that it remains a complete secret to modern chemistry.
We used to think the civilization of Easter Island collapsed because the isolated natives mindlessly chopped down all their trees to transport their massive stone moai statues.
They didn't. Modern soil and skeletal analysis prove the islanders practiced highly sustainable rock mulch farming for generations, and their society was only destroyed after the arrival of European slave traders and diseases.
We used to think the dense Amazon rainforest was a pristine, untouched wilderness, entirely devoid of ancient urban civilization.
It isn't. Modern LiDAR satellite technology cutting through the jungle canopy has exposed a massive, sprawling network of pre-Columbian urban centers, interconnected highways, and artificial canals that once housed millions of people before they were completely erased by smallpox.
We used to think the precision-cut stone blocks of Pumapunku in Bolivia were carved using primitive copper chisels and stone hammers.
It is physically impossible. The blocks are made of hyper-hard diorite and andesite, and the laser-straight interior cuts and perfect 90-degree angles prove the pre-Inca builders possessed a master understanding of abrasive stone sawing technology that defies our current evolutionary timeline.
We used to think mainstream archaeology has fully mapped out the comprehensive story of human intelligence and our ancestral timeline.
They haven't. We have only excavated less than 10% of our planet's historical ruins, meaning our entire understanding of where we come from is balanced on a tiny, fragile fragment of a much larger forgotten story.
We look back at the ruins of our ancestors and see a primitive world of myth and stone.
But the deeper we dig into the earth, the more we realize that history isn't a straight line of progress. It is a cycle of forgotten geniuses, buried empires, and truths we are forced to discover twice.
If you want to help us unearth the true baseline of human history, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below with the exact historical illusion that broke your understanding of the past.
Thank you for watching this chapter of Ages and Omens. Until next time, don't trust the timeline.